Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to this new edition of Mind Podcast. This is Adit Kapadia, and with me is my compadre Pramod Kumar Boravalli, who has forgiven me for waking him up early in the morning. Normally he doesn't, but today's guest is such that Pramod, it even inspired Pramod to wake up. So together I have with me a national security analyst, the founder of Straits News Global and BharatShakti.in, and an author, a columnist, strategic affairs expert, and someone we've longed to have this discussion with, Nitin Gokhale. Hi, Nitin.
Hi Adit and hi Pramod. Sorry
Hi.
to wake you all up early morning, but I am an early morning person, so I thought everybody is. I always think that way. So
I am too. I am too. So this is perfect because, or especially if you want to discuss good things, we better wake up, early in the morning. That way our day will be better. So,
yeah,
See, guys, my daughters are literally running my schedule. So they were the ones who were waking me up. Ki Adit Mama is going to be angry. Wake up. They were actually doing my hair, applied gel and everything. Or abhi abhi chale gaye.
yeah. No, no, good.
So
Great to know that. Great to know that.
so
so
I'll get things kicked off, Nitin. We'll start with the India-China stuff because of course the whole world is talking about it for a change right now because in a sort of a no news semester. The reason I said semester is because from February to June there is nothing, absolutely nothing except COVID. So what has happened in Ladakh? What has happened in Ladakh? The recent skirmishes. There have been so much controversies. Everyone has their own view on it. So we'll tell Nitin to explain that. And the first 20 minutes will be focused on that. And the last 15-20 minutes we're going to talk about some of Nitin's books that I've been really wanting to discuss. So hang around, guys, for that for sure. So over to you, Nitin. To just start, give an introduction. Everyone knows about what is going on in India, China now with the news. What do you view as the current scenario? Because they met last week on 6th June, and since then there has almost been sort of a pullback, right? So,
Well, so let me say what has happened in the last 1 week or so. Basically, on 6th June, the first of the official meetings took place, although there were informal meetings on the border and there were telephone discussions between Ministry of External Affairs officials and Ministry of Foreign Affairs of China. Those things were happening as far as negotiations were concerned. But the first formal meeting on the current standoff, current controversy happened on 6th of June, as you rightly said. Since then, there have been at least half a dozen meetings at the local level in Ladakh at 2 or 3 different points at the 1 and 2 star level, that is brigadier and major general level, because that was the roadmap that was discussed. In fact, I was lucky to get the first information on the roadmap, which was evolved on 6th of June between the lieutenant generals, where it was decided that they will take each of the face-off points individually and resolve them individually before coming to the package. We can call it package deal, package solution, whatever. So those meetings have taken place in the last 1 week from Monday to Saturday, and tomorrow again it's likely to, on Monday, that is Monday India time, it is likely to resume once again. So what has happened in those meetings is this, according to informed people who are involved or who know about it, is.
being very humble when he calls his sources as informed people.
No.
But like
So,
a good journalist, we're not going to pester him on his sources. I'm just saying
no,
that.
I can't tell you the sources also, but certainly I've sort of spoken about it publicly, that I've been on one side of the debate about what happened really. So let me just give you a brief kind of chronology of what happened. So on 5th and 6th of May, the Chinese came in near the line of actual control in 4 points. One is at PP Petrol Point 14, then Galwan River Valley, Hot Springs, and the Pangangso north bank of Pangangso between Finger 4 and Finger 8. By now, I think almost everyone who's watching this knows these names, and I don't want to get into those details because it will take too much time. But they were surprised, the Chinese were surprised by the speed and response of the Indian army on the ground. There was a little lag in building up the same strength, but Indian Army immediately built up, and therefore you saw those reports and videos of the skirmishes and jostling and beating up each other, that kind of thing that happened. Two surprises there from the Chinese. One is that they came into the Galwan area for the first time after 1962, and two, in Finger area, they came in a much larger strength than they have ever come. Earlier, they used to come in groups of 10, 15, 20. This time, they came in with about 80 to 100 people, and therefore, the Indian side was outnumbered, so to say, and therefore, the skirmishes and injuries to people. Now, two reasons for it, one strategic, one tactical. On the strategic part, I think China is actually signaling to almost everyone from Japan to Bhutan, I would say, that they are as strong, as assertive, as powerful militarily and economically, despite COVID and despite all the pushback from the world, the negative sentiments, and they wanted to demonstrate that. So if you look at what's happened across the geographies from East China Sea, then coming to South China Sea, the Indonesian shores, Philippines, Vietnam, and then India, and then finally the tri-junction of India, Bhutan, and China. So that is the strategic reason, the strong signaling from their side that we are as strong, so don't take us lightly, don't go too much against us. The tactical reason in Finger area especially was that in October last year, an Indian patrol of the Kumaoni troops, those who are posted there, they found a way to go behind them from Finger 4 to Finger 7 along a mountainous route. And the Chinese didn't forget it. So they didn't want that to happen again or be surprised again by the Indians. And therefore, they have now deployed themselves between Finger 4 and Finger 8 and have put up tents and are there in the larger numbers there. That's the position. I've talked about the talks. The talks are now in stages that they will resolve this one by one, Galwan, Hot Springs, and PP14 to begin with. And then finally, the biggest contentious issue is the Finger area,
yes,
which will happen or which will find a solution. It will find a solution only at the Lieutenant General level, stop another round of that, which we expect to happen another 10-15 days. So that's the gist. Although I went on too long, but I thought it's important.
No, I'm glad you did, because it's almost as a past, present, future. Now, I'll come to Pramod in a second. Now, how we went from what you described in your book on Aryan Cow, where China was inviting India for impartial investigations, and now to here with China is a whole new podcast probably we have to do on that. But before I come to you, Pramod, you had a question for Nitin.
Yeah, so generally speaking, most people now are hooked onto your YouTube channel. So you don't have to give much more explanation than what you did, because they are quoting your video as a referenceable sort of kind of point for, which position is where. I saw yesterday the comparison between the two air forces, and I'll come to that in a little bit. But my question is, China is known to do this. In 1962, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, when the world's attention was focused on the Russians and the United States, they did what they had to do as far as India is concerned. In 1979, they did that with Vietnam. So they are experts at diverting attention. Their propaganda machine is always on a hyperdrive. So how is this different? Were we not supposed to, our strategic thinkers were not supposed to expect this from the Sun Tzu disciples?
No, so therefore, I think the strategic experts in India or elsewhere are not surprised by what they have done. They always look at the opportunity to exploit. When the world's attention is somewhere else, they want to exploit that opportunity. But as I said, with India, they have one more reason to do it, and that's the tactical reason that I explained in Finger area. And of course, because India is the only big country amongst the rising or the established powers which has an uncontested border, so they get this chance to do it quicker than anywhere else. the land border, the uncontested land border. So therefore, I don't think anybody is surprised. What probably was not estimated or not really assessed was the numbers that they will bring in. You know, the numbers are larger, but as I said, they were also surprised by the speed and the response of the Indian Army or the Indian military and the Indian decision makers. So I think, you know, anybody who's saying that China surprised us doesn't know the ground reality.
Especially with Xi, might I add, Adit, with your permission, especially with Xi Jinping's leadership being threatened and questioned now because of the PR disaster, because of the Wuhan virus. And so what my question is that obviously with the NSA, you know, taking care of these strategic planning aspects, and you know, when you look at the force comparison as well, you know, whether it is a division strength or a brigade strength, we have a corps, the 14 corps in Leh, that can itself take care of a larger geographical area, right? So I'm not able to understand what is surprising in these, you know, sort of a, you know, who blinks first sort of a thing. I think this happens all the time, doesn't it?
Oh, indeed it happens. I mean, you don't have to go back too long. I was just researching 2013 Depsang plane incident in April and May 2013. It went on for 21 days. They came in almost 19 kilometers, pitched tents there and sat there. And it took some doing both militarily and diplomatically for them to go back. We had similar incident in 2014 when Xi Jinping was in India. And they came into or tried to come into Shumar or Chumur as we call it in southern Ladakh. And 2017 we know what happened in Doklam. Doklam, although is slightly different because it involved Bhutan, but that's still something that India did. So that's why I'm saying that, you know, all this hype that is there, that our land is gone, they've occupied. It's not something that we need to worry about. Land is not going anywhere, because there are these mechanisms and India is not blinking. India is prepared to sit through the winters also, Indian Armed Forces. So therefore, I think the Chinese are testing our response each time they come in, and where are the gaps, where they can exploit it, is what their tactics is.
There are two things that happened in 2013 that didn't right now. First, there are 5 more TV channels today, and there are 10 more Twitter conspiracy theorists. Right? Because as a strategic affairs expert, it probably infuriates you even more seeing people peddle all sorts of conspiracy theories just based on Wacker's bunk and not real sources, real information, right? You have to go with maps, you have to go with information. You can't just put out theories saying, I have 2 people who told me so.
That's true. And but you know, such is the nature of our media and our democracy, that anybody and everybody and his uncle and his aunt can become strategic affairs experts or give advice to the Indian military. And that's par for course. I think, you know, across the political spectrum, when people are in power, they know how to handle this. I mean, if you've heard former National Security Advisor Shiv Shankar Menon speaking to one of the leading anchors, he also says that these things have to be conducted in in private, in behind the scene, the kind of discussions that have to take place. There can't be a ball by ball commentary. And I'm surprised to see that those who are asking for ball by ball commentary had an exactly opposite view in 2013. About
Nitin, Nitinji, you're stirring the hornet's nest when you are saying patient doesn't need to know. The buck doesn't stop there. What are you saying? Adit is getting disappointed right now.
No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that there is a time and place to do all this. My own sense has always been this. I've learned from senior editors like Vinod Mehta and M.V. Kamath, who always said that there will be a time and place to question the government or question the decision, but not during the crisis. So this had happened to me during the Kargil reporting in 1999, when we had a very explosive story, and Vinod Mehta told me, no, Nitin, not right now. Let the war get over. Then we'll start questioning. That's the way it should be. And we did it actually. If you go back to the history of Kargil war, we did that. It used to be an Outlook magazine that time.
So I have to ask you this question, and this is going to be the last question on the strategic affairs. Then we'll talk a little bit about foreign policy, which sort of
Sure.
completes on that. But basically, so I told we have a fantastic team of foreign policy strategic affairs editors and columnists for our website, and I told them I was having this discussion with you. So they actually sent me some questions to ask you. Now they sent me so many questions that unke saath hi pura session lag jayega. They too had the same curiosity as I did, but Kishore Narayan, Harita Pusarla, and Mohal Joshi, I'm going to sort of merge their questions into one. And I can ask you this, that, days ago, Rahul Singh reported there was an alternate to DBDSO road, the other road going over Sasarla as an alternate to the current road. So one of the question was, what is the current status of it? And the other question was, the remaining strategic roads, are they on completion? Are they on track for completion in December 2022? Or, what have you heard? What is your assessment of it?
No, so let me give you, I'll come to that Saserla road a little later, but let me give you how things have progressed. First of all, let's look at the policy that India had until 2008. Until 2008, Indian policy was that we will not build roads going right up to the line of actual control, because the Chinese, in case they come in, if they attack, will be able to use those roads. So let's not build those roads. That was the policy till 2008, mind you. It changed in 2008 under the UPA 1 government. But by the time it got implemented, by the time clearances came, by the time everybody came on the same page, it was not until 2012 that all these roads actually started taking shape. The strategic roads that we keep talking about, 73 strategic roads.
This was the time when Bapu Nadkarni was our defense minister.
That's right. Absolutely.
Who don't know, Bapu Nadkarni was a bowler who bowled 32 overs and 27 of them were maidens, but didn't take a single wicket. So Shekhar,
I know that.
A.K. Anthony. No, you have, of course, this was for our viewers and listeners. Shekhar Gupta used to call A.K. Anthony that कि वो maiden डालता था पर एक भी wicket कभी नहीं लिया.
नहीं लेता था. He never did that. So, in fact, I had this article written for a foreign website called Fair Observer, where I said the defense minister as the enemy of the defense forces.
That piece.
Yeah,
a big piece.
That's right. So coming back to the road, so this started off. So between 2015 and 2020, BRO's budget has gone up from 4,000 crores to 10,000 crores, and each paisa has been spent. And one of its sterling achievements has been to get the DSDBO road through, the 255-kilometer DSDBO road, and the Atal tunnel or the Rohtang tunnel, the Lipulekh road, and now of course Sela tunnel work has started. So they have actually got going in the last 5 years tremendously under the current DG, Harpal Singh. And that is what is irking the Chinese much more, because they had the first movers advantage and they thought India will not be able to do it. But India is now demonstrating that they are reaching further, and therefore the intensity and the frequency of encounters on the line of actual control has increased, because we are getting there much often and much faster. That's point number one. So the other road that you spoke about, the alternate road, the Saserla Murgo road, is now completed up to the Saserla Pass. But getting into the Saserla Pass is a very difficult proposition, because it's the terrain is tough, the weather is always inclement, and therefore once it gets through, which will take at least another couple of years until that gets through. But more than that, I'm more interested in a road now going from Rohtang or from Manali to Leh via Padam and Zanskar. A new alignment has been found to get to Leh faster. Then you bypass all the other earlier routes, which is happening. The old Manali Leh route is of course there, but that is operational only for 4 months. Once tunnel comes up at Sinkulla, it will be an all-weather road. Now all this actually gives us an ability to take on the Chinese at those places which were inaccessible. Galwan was inaccessible, so was DBO. So therefore, you can expect more intense and more frequent and more prolonged standoffs in coming years.
strange intersectionality you have found, Nitin, because as your passion is strategic affairs, my professional passion is roadways, because that's what I decide for a living. So when you were saying this, that the new alignment has been found, this is quite interesting, because the terrain and the elevation differences are so challenging there. I can't even tell you guys that for them to find a new alignment, it is literally like threading a needle. I mean, so even construction, because you don't want to demolish existing structures and superstructures which cause disturbances to the valley, because we do have natural frontiers also protecting us from China at
True.
critical
True.
points. I'm not going to elaborate because I want us to stay protected.
Yeah.
Pramod, you have a question, and then I'm going to go into the foreign policy part of it.
Well, so the concern I have is that the forces have learned a lesson. The strategic community has started thinking in a different direction, but there is an important element, which is the narrative part, which is what you do, which is what we do, which is to try to revitalize the Indian public and kind of gain their confidence that, look, we might have committed so many mistakes in 62, but then we also gave them a bloody nose in 67, right? And we have the upper hand in Doklam, but we don't talk about this. And the younger generation just has a sort of a psyche that, look, maybe we can hold off Pakistan, but when it comes to China, because of their economy, because of their numbers, so what I'm saying, the narrative part has always been a weakling as far as the Indian defense establishment is also concerned. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, in fact, that I have noticed for a long time. I used to be in the northeast of India, and have traveled in Arunachal extensively, also in Sikkim. And when I came to Delhi in 2006, I realized that there is very little understanding or knowledge about China in strategic, not strategic circles really, but in the media fraternity. So when I got a first chance to go to Tibet at the invitation of the Chinese, and to get onto that train from Beijing to Lhasa, although I got on board that train at Lanchao. And it was a fantastic experience to go and look what was happening inside Tibet, because they were quite open in those years. I'm talking about 2006, 2007.
Yeah.
And then ever since then, I have realized that our adversary, and I think bless Josh Fernandez, he said this in 1998, 99, that China is our adversary or enemy number one, which I firmly believe it is. And I've said this at a number of places. In fact, just last week, I spoke at least about 6 different places in 3 languages, Hindi, Marathi, and English. And I keep repeating this, and I don't mind repeating it here again, that Pakistan is like a monkey on our back, which we can deal with, predictable, and we shouldn't be spending too much energy with Pakistan or on Pakistan. We should rather tackle and look at how to tackle China, because if you can take care of China challenge as a competitor and a country where you have to cooperate on certain issues, then you have already taken care of Pakistan, because I regard Pakistan as the latest province of China. So therefore, I think that narrative part I'll come to, and therefore I am actually with a couple of friends, or 3-4 friends, trying to inform, empower a lot of our youths and uninitiated people, because strategic experts, they have their set patterns and set ideas about how to deal with China and how not to deal with China. But I want the people, general people, students, academics, lawyers, doctors, professionals, to understand what it means to understand China. And that, I think, we also have to prepare the country as a whole. And I hope the decision makers look at that a little more closely for an eventual give and take whenever it happens. Because there have to be a compromise, there have to be a give and take. You cannot say that we want every inch of the land back, although that's a good rhetoric to do. So therefore, this is important, the narrative setting, and I'm happy to be part of a small part of that narrative setting.
Absolutely. I mean, terrific, absolutely terrific point on that, Nitin. I want to talk a little bit about the foreign policy segment, and then we'll go to the last part about your books. I'm so sorry if we're going over time, but this is a fascinating conversation. So I'll only take 10, 15 minutes of your time after. But
Yeah.
today, you interestingly, you call Pakistan an extended province of China. For the longest time, people would say in the strategic affairs that it's the 51st state of America, that that Pakistan might get that status before Puerto Rico and Guam do. The real question is, how do we deal with the new American attitude towards China, right? Because I was surprised by one thing, that not only has Trump taken a hard line on China when it comes to an India-China thing, he actually invited India to the G7, much to the chagrin of the Chinese. But you have the Democrats, Eliot Engel, who made a very strong statement on China through his official office. He's the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee. So you have both the Democrats, and for all our Indian viewers, listeners, I'll tell you this: Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib do not represent the leadership of the Democrat Party. Eliot Engel, Nancy Pelosi do. So till they make a statement that is, of course, India has to counter what the fringes of the Democrats say too. But the mainstream of the Democratic Party, after what they have said on China, it's very critical. I mean, it's quite interesting. So,
That's
how do you view this?
no. So I think India is aware that US has launched sort of trade war on China, and it's willing to, I won't say cheer from the sidelines, but willing to be a contributor behind the scene to that war or that effort on part of the United States. But there's another issue that sort of concerns New Delhi and strategic decision makers in New Delhi, is that none of the, let's say, the Quad countries plus three now who are coming to the picture, or the G7, have issues with China as India has. And therefore, India has to deal with China bilaterally no matter what happens. I mean, it cannot openly or formally join any anti-China alliance. It does not want that to happen, because the problems are at our doorstep, either in the Himalayas or in the Indian Ocean. And therefore, India has to strike that right balance. And I'm sure the Americans understand that. There is one thing to do public statements, and quite another to have behind the scene negotiations and strategies evolved between, as I said, Quad plus three: South Korea, New Zealand, Vietnam. And I think we're doing that quietly, the Indian decision makers. And so even Democrats will understand that, even if they come to power. I don't know what the issue is in the US.
I'm glad. See, we are all political junkies at heart. So, acha hai, you gave me that segue also, that who knows what will happen in the next 5 months. Because this is truly an inflection point in American politics. What is happening right now? I cannot tell people enough. People are saying, "Ki, Arey, ye kya hoga?" I've been here for 13 years. I have never seen this. It is, and we've seen 4 years of Republican presidency. Well, 6 years, because I was here when Bush, the last year of Bush, 1.5 years, and 8 years of Obama. And this is something completely unprecedented.
Right.
So it's, as they say, there were two extremes, right? You had the first African American president given by the Democrats, and then you went to the other extreme, and then you had the first reality star. Oops, I mean Donald Trump. So
this is going to be huge. You just called him a reality star. Nobody has said that to him yet. How dare you? But on a serious note, just the nascent relationship that the United States and India have, there are so many layers to it. I'm pretty sure you understand it. It's not as rose tinted as people think it is. Especially the folks in the urban middle class think that there is such sort of a romance that is happening with the United States and India. India has to balance these things, because there is a legacy of distrust. There is a legacy of the colonial hangovers that were influencing the relationship, and the mirror from which the United States used to view India as well. And having lived here in this country for 20 years, I'm pretty sure that there is a confluence of interest more than this so-called call for a deeper strategic alliance, I don't think that exists, because if that was the case, they would have offered us the F-35 instead of repackaging the F-16 and calling it an F-21, right? So ye jo jokes hote hain na, it pains me that I am in this country and I'm championing for the best relationship so that we can get access to a predator drone, not a drone without the armaments with it. So ye jo cheez hai na, jo what we see is it's very difficult to express. But I'm pretty sure you guys have realized that as well in India.
Of course, we have in India, and as I said, there are more positives in the relationship than negatives. But we have to work on the negatives to make it maybe more positive going forward. That's something that I can encapsulate as far as India-US relations are concerned.
Absolutely.
Right.
So going in the concluding part, I told Nitin before we started recording the podcast that I have two of my favorite and the latest books of his that I've read. One is the one on RN Cow, which I recommend everyone should read it, and the other is the Securing India the Modi Way. But before I get into that, I have to ask you about your book on Sri Lanka, right? Because when you talk about India-China, Sri Lanka is probably one of the most weird jigsaw puzzle pieces that we've seen move from one end to the other in the last 10 years. And you thought that all the action in Sri Lanka was over in 2009, but the real action was just about to begin. So what you wrote almost is a preface to what we are seeing in the last 4 years. So how would you explain sort of what happened?
See, the Sri Lanka book happened in a ziffy, in the sense that I covered that war, the Elam War 4, for 3 years for NDTV that time, and I immediately wrote that book like a extended reportage. So if you see, it's mainly about the military reporting or the reporting on the military operations, and of course the strategic underpinning to all that. I actually have been planning to update that book, but somehow it's been overtaken by other books over the last 5 years. The book on Siachen, 2 books on Modi. In fact, Adit, you have the older edition of Securing India the Modi Way. This has Balakot and the anti-satellite test, which was done that's a 2017 book. This is 2019. So maybe you want to update that on Kindle, but no matter what happens. And it was coincidentally lying here. That's why I showed you. Otherwise, I had to pick it up from there. So anyway, Sri Lanka I will come to, and I'll tell you that India has had a very kind of blowing hot, blowing cold kind of relationship with the Rajapaksa brothers. But the current president is a former army officer, and as you know, and I can say that I know him pretty well.
But does he in putting his own name on the photo on the currency notes?
No, he's not. He's not. And not him. Elder brother, yes. Not him. He's a typical no-nonsense man, and shown of all the paraphernalia and others that he's doing. He will do good for the country, for Sri Lanka. But right now, I think it's on an upward trajectory, the India-Sri Lanka relationship, but it's gone through ups and downs in the last 15 years. But I'm hopeful that India will actually side with Sri Lanka to keep outside forces away. And that includes the United States.
Absolutely.
In Sri Lanka.
No, I completely, especially near the port of Hambantota and the port of Colombo. Those are the two critical.
Including US and China. And that's a contest that is on. It's an ongoing contest. There is no permanent victory and permanent defeat in strategic affairs. I always feel. Look at the example of Maldives. Adit, 2018 January, people had written India off, and by 2019 March, we have a government in Maldives which is not only completely in support of India, but in a way beholden to India.
Yeah.
But Pramod, I'm coming to you. But Nitin ka hi acha hai. He gives me segues to his own books without me telling him to. So he now gives me a good.
No, because he wrote this wonderful book on Cow, whom I have idolized since I grew up in India, and I used to even communicate with.
No, Pramod, I won't dare ask any questions on Cow. That is you.
Okay.
But I have to ask, he talked about upgrading his books. We have to upgrade our discussion to one point to include Nepal, because abhi jo Nepal mein hua hai, right? We have a very pro-China government. Nepal is almost what Sri Lanka was 8 years ago.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So Nepal. So again, Nepal, I think, is a temporary phase. Don't forget the larger picture. They're doing it at the instance of China. They also Oli was fighting for his own survival, political survival. Therefore, he's gone to the extreme. But generally, the people-to-people contact, and also don't forget India's influence and India's outreach to the Madhesis, who are 1/3 of the population, remains intact. So it's not that you're going to have constant friction with Nepal. It's a phase, and India has already taken a tough stand. They are now asking, the Nepalese are asking for negotiations, which I think India will let them stew in their own juice for some time before agreeing to any negotiations on that part. So I think India can become tough when it wants to, and it can appear to be very squeamish when it doesn't want to. But that's the way these things happen in the country.
Absolutely. Pramod, I'll give you the last word.
There are three sections, and you've kind of talked about it in your talks, but hopefully in the next decade, that should be the focus of how the Indic civilizational connect we have with these countries, whereby we are coming out of the dark shadows of non-alignment and "Arey, mujhe kuch nahi chahiye, I'm going to be detached" and all that. Time has come for us to reclaim that connection. Whether we start a Indo-aid program like a US aid program, whereby you go in and take care of immediate business, help them out, get your Exim Bank to give soft loans or whatever, jo bhi karna hai to extricate them from this dragon hold. But at the same time, what I want to see, and I would love for it to happen, is the reclaiming of the Buddhist heritage and the Hindu heritage, which is what has connected us and which is what is the emotional thread we get connected to them, right? And we have this feeling of ki Nepal apna bhai hai, but Nepal, if he wants to get away from it, that's not going to be something that we should stay away from. We should contest that space. Don't you agree, Nitin? Aapko
I do. In fact, just about 2 days ago, I spoke about how India should revise its One China policy.
You did.
And I want to also say this, that there is a strong Buddhist diplomacy that India can do and initiate in its neighborhood. That's Nepal, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, of course, and then Southeast Asia. I think that connect that the Buddhism circuit or the Buddhism diplomacy is something that India must emphasize on and use it more often, because that's a soft power which China never hope to match.
They won't.
Pockets, but this will never happen. So therefore, this roti beti ka rishta with Nepal, our civilization will connect with Sri Lanka, with Myanmar. That's something that we have to now sort of take it to the highest level possible.
ये बुद्धिज्म वाला बोल के Nitin, you have shown another red flag to one of our Twitter conspiracy theorists, but because lately that's what he has been saying on. But I want to conclude by saying your book on cow, and I want to quote a passage that you wrote on this, with your permission. That you that time China had not widely been accepted as the respectable member of the international community of nations. And India, as like one of the few countries who had established diplomatic relations with China, Prime Minister Nehru had taken upon himself the responsibility of introducing Zhou Enlai. And this is also, I thought, because in the years later he met Zhou Enlai, didn't claim that Nehru never introduced me, and it was very presumptuous on his part. So the India-China relation, this is in the 50s, right? And this is right after this is when the Kashmir Princess accident happens, and China actually requests India to carry out, because this was a conspiracy to assassinate the Chinese premier. And what Cow does is quite phenomenal. So how do you explain this weird dichotomy? This has been around for 6 decades, right? Longer than we've been alive, and probably longer than after long we'll be gone, after we're long gone. So how do you...
Exactly. So the point is what, the papers that Cow left behind gives us so many insights. I have not taken even 1/10 of what he wrote in his own memoirs, which are available publicly right now. And in that, he gives out so many details of his insights into the Chinese mind. I mean, that Bandung conference, Nehru was the star, and Zhou Enlai was like a supplicant in a way, according to all available accounts. But just see, within 10 years, by 90, or within 7, 8 years, the Chinese became the aggressor and became something that India regretted, or Nehru regretted giving them that space. Although there is one remark that Kao has quoted Nehru saying when he came back from the Kashmir census, the investigation, that don't trust the Chinese, they're not reliable. But why did he go on to trust the Chinese so much post 1956 or 57 is something will remain a mystery. And therefore, to me, writing this book on R.N. Kao was a lesson in history and a kind of ringside view on what happened in history.
I used to communicate, and I'll take this to my grave, but I used to communicate with B. Raman. He used to live in Chennai before he passed away.
Right.
The things that Rao achieved, that is what I keep talking about, right? From a narrative, and from, you have all of these spy novels, the out of world, larger than life picture that the CIA or the KGB or the Mossad portrays. Our boys did no less. Actually, they have more field experience, which is why today we can stare China.
I must add to something what you're saying. For any of you guys who are listening to this discussion, and I'm taking at liberty, I know we're talking about Nitin's books, but if you haven't read The Cowboys of Raw, first go hide somewhere and then go and read it. You can understand India's strategic thing and not have read that B. Raman's seminal book on the Raw.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And the Cowboys, and Nitin, you can add and summarize this. They embody dharma. That is what I'm passionate about. The motto of Raw is Dharmo Rakshati Rakshitaha.
Exactly.
How better can it be? They have protected, and then unfortunately they don't publicize their work, or they don't fictionalize it. You have to go into the psyche of the younger generation. Make a romantic hero out of the guy. You know what I'm saying? ये कमी है अपने लोगों में.
बिल्कुल है. In fact, I had a 1 hour long, 2.5 hour long interaction in Nagpur on the book on this. I'll send you a link on that. And they were engineering students, they were professionals who wanted to understand how can I join RNAW. And I'm saying this RNAW deliberately because Kao hated if it was called RAW. He always wanted it to be called RNAW, Research and Analysis Wing. So, there is certainly this need, and my book is just one small part of that. Maybe once I get hold of the more classified papers that he's left behind, we will do a revised edition, maybe a new book, I don't know. But certainly it was an humbling experience to know all the great things that RNAW has done and is doing.
Absolutely. All right. In conclusion, I think I couldn't have ended it on a better note. First of all, I don't know how you got Ajit Doval to write the foreword on the Raw book, but if there is any one person who can give a best tribute to R.N. Kao, is probably Ajit Doval. Because and even in his foreword, he probably rewrote it and left out 10 things what he wanted to say, but he did say.
Indeed he did. He was very, he is the most careful man I've seen while speaking or writing. And I just have to say this, that I've known him for more than 2 decades. So, even before he came.
What P.V. Narasimha Rao said once, it's not about what you said, but what you don't say is what the real.
You'll be surprised. In 1984, my guru in journalism, M.B. Kamath, told me 3 things, and I'm going to take credit on that, which I have followed all my journalistic career for 37 years, is this. He told me, young man, you are as good as your last byline. What you have written today, what work you have done today is important, not what you have done 20 years ago. Nobody is going to, don't rest on your laurels. Number 2, he said, it's more important what you don't write than what you write. Because so many people will share their confidence with you, they'll give you secrets. So it's more important to do that. And the final thing he said is that do serious work, but never take yourself seriously. And that's what I've been doing all my life.
Fantastic, fantastic. No, so listeners, no readers or listeners, viewers, no recommendations today. Read Nitin's books. We usually do a non-political recommendation, but I have just recommended 6 books, Nitin. So I think they have plenty to chew their brains on for the next week. But glad to know, Nitin, that you're safe, staying safe in this COVID crisis. And thank you so much for joining and taking out the time. I know we went about 10-15 minutes overboard. We apologize,
Yes.
but it was a terrific discussion.
It's fine. It's a pleasure for me to talk on all these issues and just like a chat, a fireside chat or a chat in the evening, that kind of thing. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
This is like a chai ka theka. We just all grab our cups of tea, enjoy, and stuff. Most of the things we talk on the record, but off the record is where all the more fun happens. Thank you everyone for joining, and we'll be back next week with a lot more. Thank you guys.